the man himself, a tiny figure at this distance, arguing with his fellow lords. He knew what Clare was proposing and prayed God would grant his wish. "Let them attack, Lord," Art silently begged. "Let them come blundering into the heart of the valley." His fingers curled about the grip of his sword. It had belonged to his father. How he longed to meet the Clare himself in a fair fight and plunge the blade into his heart. The young English nobleman was greedy and ambitious, and had a vested interest in defeating the Irish of Wicklow. Once the rebels were destroyed, the royal government in Dublin had promised Clare all the rents of Wicklow. The Lord Deputy of Ireland, Geoffrey Joinville, was a much less forceful character. Clare would easily override his objections. Maurice Fitzmaurice, the third of the English captains, was another matter, a prudent veteran of many wars. If Joinville listened to Fitzmaurice over Clare, the English might not walk into the trap Art had set for them. "They come." Art shivered at the sound of horns. The host of Dublin was moving at last. Thomas de Clare led the van, of course, at the head of his own battalion of mailed knights. They came on with heavy tread, the hoofs of their destriers sinking deep in the snow. Behind them advanced the second bataille under the deputy, Joinville, then the lines of Kern on foot. Joinville's knights, resentful of losing the post of honour, jostled to close the gap between themselves and the men of Clare. Art's uncle appeared at his elbow. "The deputy fails to keep a rein on his men," the old warrior tutted in disapproval. "Look at them, pushing and shoving like a herd of bullocks. Close ranks, fools. Close up now." His nephew grinned. Cal hated to see poor discipline even in an enemy. "At least Fitzmaurice knows his business," Cal added. "See, he brings up the rear. We won't snare that old wolf." The third and last bataille of English knights, the rear guard, was indeed led by Fitzmaurice. A suitable place for the old warrior, whose mane of white hair was visible even at this distance. He rode bare-headed, probably to encourage his bannermen. Before him tramped his Connaught hinds, 2,000 of the finest young spearmen in Ireland. His flanks were guarded by the horseboys, strung out in loose order. "Now may God bless the deputy," cried Art. "If he had a grain of sense, he would have put Fitzmaurice in charge of the host and stayed behind in Dublin, warm and safe. His pride would not allow it. My Lord Joinville wishes to prove himself a soldier." As always, before a fight, Art drew his sword and kissed the pommel for luck. The time of slaughter was near. He shivered with excitement. His heart pumped a little faster. The Knights of Clare, advancing at a trot, entered the mouth of Glenmalure. They rode straight into a wall of mist, only their banners and lance heads visible above the grey murk. The valley floor was wide enough for 30 horsemen to ride abreast, bound on either side by thick forest. Art could only wonder at the folly of the English captains. He was almost insulted. Did they expect to charge into Glenmalure and find MacMurrough drawn up in neat lines on open ground? What kind of fool did they take him for? He wasn't about to present his men as convenient targets for the mailed English knights, stuck up on their fine horses. No, that was not the way of war in Ireland, charging and countercharging across fair open fields as they did in England and France. Ireland was a land of bogs and forests, where knights in armour were more likely to sink in the mud than win glory in battle. The English vanguard came on at a brisk pace. They were packed close together, boot to boot, banners proudly displayed. Art felt the earth tremble gently under his feet. Anyone who got in the way of that rolling tide of steel and horseflesh would be trampled into mush. Now the English were past the mouth of Glenmalure. The hills echoed with the piercing sound of horns as they streamed into the valley, flanked on both sides by dark forest. Clare and his knights spurred on ahead of the rest at a flat gallop, eager to win the chief honour of crushing the Irish. Art slowly lifted his hand.